All right, so I'm still finding that players have a tough time understanding the relationship between wrist angles and club face, shaft angles in transition, and how the hands and wrists go in affecting all those. So I want to do a deep dive today talking through that and helping you understand more how we can use our hands and wrists better to affect shaft and club faces in the golf swing. Okay, so stay tuned and let's get into it. All right, so let's get talking about how wrist angles directly affect keeping this club face square, getting it open, closed, and what it does to the shaft angle in transition, getting it too laid off, too steep, things of that nature. All right, so all this in the beginning is going to be talked with a neutral grip, and I'll talk towards the end, or throughout, what a strong or weak grip will do and affect these things. Okay, so in taking the club away, typically I want to see a club face that's slightly on an angle, not straight up to the sky, slightly on an angle similar to our spine here. Okay, but as we get to the top, I'm always seeing different variations of our wrists. A neutral grip, maintaining a neutral face is going to have a flattish left wrist, a forearm. The trail hand is going to be having a bit of an angle, this cupped, extended position. But we'll see all the time where people will have this cupped, extended lead wrist, a very flat trail wrist like that. So what we need to understand is, sure, we might have this club face good here in this takeaway, but as we go to the top, and now I have a bit of angle in this lead wrist here, when I bring this club right back down to that same spot, now the club face is open, okay? So just understanding first that this cupped, extended position opens the face, right? If we're gonna go and do a more DJ-like thing where we get this bowing flexion in that lead wrist, okay? That in it will really close the club face. Okay, so that's kind of like wrist angles at the top, 101 to have open or closed face. So people that, most of the time, you're gonna see a lot of extension, cupping in that lead wrist, and then they fight with an open club face. So they're gonna really have to get more of the sensation of bowing that wrist or getting more of that extension in that trail wrist there. So what does this do for the shaft angle? Because now we got people coming too steep, right? A lot of times steep over the top. So when we get to the top and when we have extension, a cupped lead wrist, what that typically leads to is a shaft that is too upright, too steep, right? When I go into the same spot now and I go and bow this wrist or get it flat or towards the bowing side, flexion side, I bring my hands down the exact same path, that shaft is already on a more shallowed, laid off position here, okay? So just understanding that a cupped wrist will steepen. Flexed wrist, bowed wrist will help shallow. Just all with the wrists there alone, okay? A minor amount. Now there's other things in how to work the trail elbow and stuff like that can help us shallow even more and things like that, or steepen even more. But in terms of the wrists, you'll see as I get to the top here in a neutral grip, as I go and cup that lead wrist, and then I bow the lead wrist, you'll just see how that shaft is pointing in different directions. And I'm not trying to. That's just happening with my hands and the orientation of my wrist there, okay? So what's really important here is if you have, let's say, a strong grip. Someone's got their trail hand too much underneath the club. Now, a strong grip, as we get to the top, if I have this strong grip and I get to the top of the swing and I have this so-called neutral wrist position, flat lead wrist, but with a strong grip, well, now as I come down, that club face dead shut, all right? So a strong grip matches up more with a cupped wrist, cupped lead wrist. That's how we would maintain a square club face. But the thing that people don't usually understand there with this strong grip and maintaining this neutral club face is just that when we have that cupped or extended lead wrist position, remember what I just said a minute ago, that can lead to a steep shaft and typically does. So while that club face might have a decent chance to be square, you're starting to come steep and over the top, which means that now you're going to have to compensate another way. Okay, and then it can be vice versa on the weak grip side. Okay, so just understanding first, yes, opening and closing the club face, but cupped wrist will lead to a steep shaft. More bowed wrist can lead to a more laid off shaft. All right, so those are really important to understand if you don't have a neutral grip, because not everyone just has a perfectly neutral grip. So we got to either fix that or work around it. Okay, so if we do have that really strong grip and then we're matching it up with a cupped wrist and we notice that we're getting steep in the downswing, well, we're going to have to start adding some other feelings in the body, other moves in the body to help shallow the shaft out. Okay, if we're going to keep that strong grip. All right. Now, when it comes to players that get that club going a bit too long, maybe a little bit of excessive wrist hinge. Well, one thing that we need to understand with this is wrist hinge, when I get a lot of it, naturally puts my wrist in a more cupped position. Anatomically, it goes into extension, because if I had this neutral grip or neutral wrist position here at the top, okay, and I wanted to add a lot of wrist hinge, so from face on, if I'm trying to add a ton of wrist hinge, but I'm trying to keep a flat or bowed lead wrist, my golf club, my wrist just can't bend like that, okay? So it's only gonna go so far. If I really wanted to add wrist hinge and get this club going further, you'll notice that my wrist has to change into a more extended cupped position to get that wrist hinge to happen. Because with a flat wrist, to get this club to go further with wrist hinge, I'd physically have to break my bones to do that. I don't really want to. So this is really important to know if you're someone who overswings, gets that club head going too far down. Well, the only way that's happening is if we're getting that wrist to be twisting and getting more in that extended position. If you learned how to really fight through it and try to feel more bowing in that flexion, that lead wrist, you just wouldn't be able to get all that wrist hinge. Okay, speaking in the wrists primarily there. Okay, so these are just super important to really understand. So kind of go through that again. Neutral grip, trying to get that club face more like spine angle there to the top. With neutral grip, we're trying to get a kind of flat wrist, get a cupped, like we're holding a tray of drinks here into that trail wrist. And we're trying to learn to maintain those as we come down so that it's still on the spine. And then from there, we can go and turn through. So one last thing is the reason that we're looking to have this club face on this angle here, because typically at impact, we're, for most players, we're trying to get our hands ahead, hit down and compress the ball. Well, the more and more we go and get these hands pushing ahead, the more it tends to open the club face. So if I have this club face straight up to the sky, let's say, oh, that used to be thought of as the square club face, but then from there I'm going to go and push my hands ahead at impact. Well, that club face is open. I'm going to be blocking everything. So that's why we want to have this club face on more of an angle here, now helping us offset the fact that our hands are going to be more forward at impact, maintaining a square club face. Okay, so try these out, get in a mirror, fiddle around with these ideas of just knowing what a cupped wrist will do to the shaft, a bowed wrist will do to the shaft, as well as the club face, as well as overswinging, those type of things. And they can really help you start diagnosing some things like coming a little bit too steep in the downswing. Maybe it is to do with the wrist angles, maybe not, maybe something else, but they do play a huge part in a lot of things, okay? All right, so there's a good look at wrist angles and not only how they affect club face, but shaft angle in the downswing and also wrist hinge, things like that, okay? So if you got any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe. But if I can help you with your own game from anywhere in the world, you can find me on the Skillest app, Coach Nathan Lenhart. All right, so we'll see you next time.